are good to go. Sweet, man. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I know we're all in kind of a bind, and I think that, yeah, we'll get through. But yeah, we're just trying to give out a bunch of free information. I really like you because you have, I can tell you're a hard gainer like me. And in my opinion, hard gainers are the absolute best resources for information because anyone that has taken it to a level above mediocre has just had little room for error on that road. And I know that road. So, but for the audience, let's tell who you are. This is Peter. Is it Fitschen?
Yeah, Fitschen.
Fitschen, gotcha. So yeah, this is actually for everyone watching. This is our first time actually talking. He has his PhD in nutritional sciences. He actually is an author, co-author of a book with Cliff Wilson. Really good on competitive natural bodybuilding. They do a really good job at just covering literally every aspect of the sport. So it's really exciting. Peter was also crushed like me. You were in a prep when everything got shut down and closed, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was 6 days out from my first show, but I mean, I'm still planning to compete this year once shows start again. I'm just hanging out, waiting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's I was 12 days out. I was in prep too before everything got shut down. And I'm kind of just like in the midst, and it'll be a little bit for me. I'm going to wait because, all the gyms are shut down and our main job is opening a gym. So like, we're going to wait till we get back on track and everything. But yeah, tell a little bit of the audience about yourself. Like, you do have your PhD in nutritional sciences. Like, where did you go to school?
Yeah, so my PhD is from the University of Illinois. So I have a PhD in nutritional sciences from there. And then I have a master's in biology with a physiology concentration and a bachelor's in biochem, and I minored in nutrition. And so those are both from University of Wisconsin, La Crosse. So that was 11 and a half years of school total.
Yeah, that's a lot. Holy cow. Okay, yeah, that's a lot going on. Yeah.
So I was in school for 11 and a half years. So my first show is actually here probably next week. It'll be 16 years since my first show. So I've been in the bodybuilding world quite a while. I started training probably spring of 2002. My first show was April of 2004. So I've dieted down to stage lean 6 times in my life. This is the 6th time. I've been around. Won my pro card in 2012. Did my first year competing as a pro 2016. So this will be the first time since 2016 I'm back on stage. And I mean, the amount that prep takes, like I'm not planning to do this again till, at least 4 to 6 more years. So that's kind of why I'm holding on now, because what's a few more months when it's been 4 years and it's going to be 4 to 6 more. It's a drop in the bucket over the long term. And then, on the, I have my CSCS, so I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist. I've published, obviously my book, and then over 20, I don't know what the number is now, somewhere in the 20s for peer-reviewed publications. I've co-authored. And then other than that, I mean, I've been coaching. I prepped my first client actually in 2008. It was a buddy of mine for free. He was my workout partner.
Hey, you gotta get experience. And I just want to tell the crowd. So you do this for a living. You coach people, nutrition programs. You write it up for a living. And I just want to say for the audience, anyone that is able to build up a repertoire to do that for a living and make it substantial and actually like thrive in any way, you have to be beyond good to do that. Okay, so like this is an industry where there's like a lot of different opinions, and for enough people to grasp yours and for you to actually help as many people. And I've seen pictures of the men and women that you have worked with, and everyone is just getting diced up. So I was actually going to step on stage with a couple of your clients, and I'm like, dang it. So go on. But yeah, anybody that does this for a living, you're really, really good. So whatever's about to be asked and said, just listen up. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is too, though, everybody and their brother, kind of like you said, you go on Instagram, you have a big Instagram following, you look good, you diet down once in your life, and hey, I'm a coach now, right? And I went about it a little different way, and I think that's probably why it's a lot more sustainable for me. I was dieting down for shows for the 3rd time. I was nearing the end of a 4-year degree related to this, and I had been doing it for about 6 years by the time I actually helped a buddy of mine for free, and then 2012 is when we actually incorporated our business, and I helped a few friends here and there on the side, between 2008, 2012. But by 2012, when we incorporated the business, I had already dieted down 4 times. I had done 7 shows. I'd won a pro card. I had 2 degrees, was working on my 3rd related to this. I had my CSCS. I had been lifting for 10 years, competing for 8. I didn't just jump in right away. And so I think I was better prepared, you know what I mean, to help people. I didn't just jump in right away. And then over, 2012 to 2015, it kind of grew, as part-time while I was going to grad school. And then by 2014, by 2015, I mean, I was basically working a full-time job while going to grad school. It just kept growing and growing. And so, since 2015, this has been my full-time job. I've done this as opposed to, something more traditional. A lot of my friends from grad school are professors or working in like medical research labs and things. And I do this. I always joke, hey, I went to school for 11 and a half years and now I travel around and tan people on the weekends, I think that, big take home point there is though, like not a lot of people do this full time like I do, but if you really do it the right way and really, have the time, the time on both like the education, the experience side, both yourself as a competitor and as a coach. And it just takes time. Like it's not a get rich fast scheme. Those things don't last long. I've been coaching, like I said, my business has been around for 8 years. It's been my full-time job, primary income for 5. I think
that's a great lesson for anyone, not just wanting to get into fitness and stuff, but entrepreneurship in general. You're over a decade of work in, so like not many people, they think they can do it for a year or 2, or their friend did a show and they can all of a sudden put them through this incredible magical prep. Everybody's looking for the secret, but yeah, I think that's great. So
yeah, I always tell people, the first time I prepped a buddy for free to the time that my business was a full-time job was 7 years. And even before I prepped my buddy for free, I was in the sport competing for 4 years, training for 6, so do the math there, beginning to full-time job was quite some time. It wasn't an overnight, like immediate thing.
Yeah. And it's when you get in the industry and the level that you're at of coaching too, the one way you get there is putting in the time and just passion. Like, I don't even have to ask you. I already know you got into this because you love helping people. You probably known like us all, like we get in this, we feel little good feelings ourselves and we help a couple people. We're like, wow, that's awesome. And you just took it to the level above level. But yeah, that's awesome, dude.
I mean, it's always so cool to see, just your clients do well, or even placing and things aside, like it's really cool to see someone like come in, they've read my book or they've heard me on a podcast or they know someone I've worked with, you know what I mean? They come in and, hey, I don't really know, they don't really know much about the process. I just want to compete. And I feel like you're a good person to guide me. And, you start working with them and they have a lot of questions. You kind of help them along the way and they have such a good, independent of placing, they have such a good experience the first time they compete that they keep doing it and they live the lifestyle and they do it in a sustainable way that's healthy, as healthy as you can make it. And you know what I mean? And it's really cool to see, clients going from, I have no idea what I'm doing to like making this a lifestyle and continuing to compete if they choose to do so, after that first prep.
Definitely. Well, yeah, let's get into some questions and stuff. Okay. So, let's talk about NEAT. Basically your daily activity. How much of a difference does NEAT, just your daily activity expenditure, the stuff you're doing, mowing the lawn, walking the dog, whatever you got to do, how much of a difference does that make in like changing your body composition?
Yeah, so that's huge. But so yeah, let's back up a little bit just for people who don't know. So total daily energy expenditure. So the total number of calories that you burn in a day kind of come from 4 different places. One's your basal metabolic rate. So that is the number of calories you expend just to stay alive. So if you laid in bed all day, how many calories would it take for you just to pump blood, filter your blood in your kidneys, your heart's pumping, your brain's functioning, just enough to keep the lights on. So that's your basal metabolic rate. Second place is thermic effective food. So roughly 10% of the calories you consume are used to digest and absorb food. Third place is exercise activity. That one's self-explanatory. You're burning calories when you're exercising. Fourth one's what you mentioned, NEAT, non-exercise activity. And so, NEAT incorporates all the movement you do outside the gym, that's non-exercise movement. So that incorporates things like twitching and fidgeting. which is involuntary, as well as things that are voluntary, like walking around. And yeah, that makes a huge difference. I mean, there's studies showing people of similar age, race, height, weight, gender, they can have differences of 2,000 calories a day or more for similar people. And oftentimes it's based on occupation, but just overall lifestyle. I mean, one thing I do with clients is I will oftentimes incorporate step counts, especially for clients who have very low activity levels, just to force them to get up and move and walk around. I think there's benefit to that, obviously for expending more calories, and it's a really powerful tool for that, but also just for stress reduction, getting outside, going for a walk. And it's low intensity, and so, you or I, we're working with a client, they're relatively healthy, and we tell them, hey, go walk an extra 2,000 calories a day. They go walk go walk 2,000 extra steps today. I got you. Yeah. 2,000 extra steps today. They go squat tomorrow, and they don't notice the difference. It takes like no recovery for them to walk 2,000 extra steps. Where if you're having them do sprints or something like that, like squatting tomorrow, you might notice that. And so, if we're talking body composition change, lifting is the focus. And so if you can add something that's low intensity that you can fit into your day, however works best for you. I always tell people, walk a pet, play with your kids, go to the store, clean your house, do something. It doesn't have to be just boring, whatever, but like, I think there's real benefit to just moving more. And generally too, if you're looking from a recovery standpoint, I feel like most people recover from their workouts better if they don't just lay around all day. And generally you see a lot less nicks and dings in the gym in someone who's moving a little bit more than someone who's super sedentary as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that's awesome. That was a great answer. So, okay, I got another one. In my experience, helping a lot of different people, I find that undereating is almost as common as overeating. And I would like to know from your viewpoint, the damage that can be done from undereating, being basically a calorie deficit, or because I run into a lot of people that think they eat a lot, but what happens is they skimp all day long and then they eat a huge meal at night, but still their calories through the day is still pretty low. And I have found many times when I just get them to eat a little more, they all of a sudden are feeling better, recovering faster, like they're losing weight, which is just crazy because they eat more. But what's your opinion on that?
So I think the first thing I'd say is my guess is they're consuming more calories at the start than they think they are. Most people humans are terrible at measuring how many calories they eat in a day. If you or I, yeah, we weigh stuff out, we track it, whatever, like, you're dieting, we can be pretty accurate, but the average person is not. And so there are studies actually showing that, where they bring people in and have them live in like metabolic wards where everything's controlled and they physically live there. And they'll ask them, like, what do you think you're eating for calories? And since they're living there, everything's controlled. They can measure exactly what they're eating. And there are studies showing people underestimate what they're eating by 1,000 calories a day or more on average. And there are also studies, even in trained dietitians. There, off the top of my head, there was a study in trained dietitians where it was similar. And they found even a trained dietitian underestimated how much they were eating by about 300 calories a day. But if I remember right, they had a group that was not a trained dietitian, not educated in that study. And if I remember right, they were like 500 to 600 off. So being educated got you closer, but even people who went to school for this still, you know what I mean? And so that just shows you how bad people are at measuring what they're eating. So I think that's one thing, I think it is probably the biggest factor a lot of times is people just don't realize how much they're eating until or a lot of times it's I'm only eating 1,200 calories a day. Yeah, maybe for 2 days, and then you binge for a day or two, and your total intake's super high.
They're telling you about the good days, and
about the good days, and so that's part of it. And then the other part is if someone is truly eating, so that's probably most of the time the situation. But the other part is metabolic adaptation is absolutely a real thing. And so someone who's dieting, their food's low. You're going to adapt. And so the number of calories, for a number of different reasons, the calories you need to lose weight. So say someone starts a cut at 200 pounds and they diet down to 170 and they've been dieting for 6 months. The calories needed to maintain, your total daily energy expenditure at 170 is going to be lower in that situation than at 200, because you've just spent 6 months in a deficit, and there's 30 pounds less of you, but you've also spent 6 months in a deficit. So there's a number of things that are happening there. And so absolutely, I general rule of thumb is you should spend more time out of a deficit than in one. You know, and so when we're talking, like we're talking my prep, for example, and so normally like I mean, my last show of the year was supposed to be in like a week here, you know, like I should have been, you know, almost done. And so I started prep in May of last year, and I did a couple diet breaks along the way. So it wasn't linear. I mean, I had weeks at maintenance and things, but,
you know, do you guys hear that? He just said that he was dieting for almost a year, and that probably wasn't strict brown rice and chicken. He probably had it planned, and it was kind of a trickle down. Is that right?
And there were diet breaks in there. So there was a 6-week stretch where I ate at maintenance. There's another couple 1-2 week stretches where I was eating at maintenance. So it wasn't linear deficit the whole time. And so you know, and so obviously I'm competing when shows start again. So obviously this is dragging the amount of time I'm this lean. I mean, I'm not in a deficit anymore. I'm eating at maintenance, or maybe even a touch above. My weight's up a couple pounds just to make me feel better. But, you know, I'm spending a lot of time really lean, a lot of time dieting. But like I said, it's going to be 4 to 6 years before I diet down for a show again. It's going to be a year plus after I'm done with my contest season before I even consider cutting again. You know, and so that's also something I would recommend for anyone dieting for shows, or just dieting in general. You know, if you're dieting significantly, especially if you're dieting for shows and you're going below your, you know, what's a sustainable body fat, it can take 4 to 6 months for hormones, metabolic rate, and things to come back after you start eating again.
And I felt that. I mean, I felt at least a couple months, even with like this an untold tale. But when you're dieting pretty hard, your sex drive, in my opinion, is a pretty good indicator of where you're at. And when you're in show prep, it does not or barely exist. So like I always use that, and that takes me a good. I mean, you can every day after a show, I feel like, you know, a little, but it takes a month or two to like solidly come back. It's crazy. So yeah.
And that's assuming you gain weight back, you know, like that's what you should gain weight back. Yeah. But I mean, assuming you gain weight back, that's what most people find is like as long as you're gaining weight back, within 4 to 8 weeks, you start noticing, all right, I'm starting to feel a little more normal. But if you look at like, and if you look at like hormones and metabolic rate and things are heading in the right direction at that point, but it can take 4 to 6 months, you know, to come all the way back. And so my general rule of thumb with someone who diets to stage lean is we're not dieting again in any way, shape, or form for at least 6 months. Like you are out of a deficit, you know, preferably longer than that. But, you know, and so that's where like the people who try to compete spring, fall, that's a really bad idea. They usually agree. They usually end up looking worse, and they usually end up, because of metabolic adaptation, you know, we talk about, I'm starting to feel better after a couple months, but you're not all the way back up here yet. You know, you're working your way up. But if you start dieting again before that 4 to 6 months, when you get all the way back up here, you're starting here. So now how bad is it going to get the next time to get there? You know, you've never given yourself any time for things to normalize. It's going to get harder and harder and harder and harder. And so, more time out of a deficit is going to be important. And I think if you look at things over the long term, you should be spending more time out of a deficit than in one. You should be spending, you know, the amount of time you're extremely lean and below that sustainable body fat should be the exception, not the norm over the course of years. You can
absolutely look good all the time, but not like stage lean. And I actually really like that you take that much time between diets. I myself take 3 years between shows, and I tell some people that, and they're like, what? And I explain, I'm like, after a show, it takes me 6 months to get back on track. And even if I competed every year, we're talking about 2 months of growth maybe. And like when you train natural, drug-free, you just cannot change that much, especially down the road. I've been training 16 years nonstop, ever stopping. Like for me to like put on, it takes time, like years of time. So no, I like that a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, I always tell people, like, if you look at my pictures, I can take all 6 times I've dieted down in my life. So 04, 06, 08, 2012, 2016 now. I could take a picture from each of those years when I'm stage lean, hand them to you and say, put these in order. And you could put them in order because I look significant every time.
Did you instinctively do that from the beginning, or did you have like a mentor or help, or like someone that you watched that you're like, oh, he does that, so then you just started to learn, or like where did you get that from naturally?
So I would say the first time I dieted down, I dieted way too soon. Like I started lifting in 02 when I was 125 pounds. I got up to like 170 by the end of 03. So I gained like 45 pounds, but if you look at the pictures, I still don't look like I lift. So like I had my newbie gains, but I still don't look like I lift.
I feel
And
you.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's bad. And so, but that's where I dieted for a show from, got down to 145, worked with a local trainer, did everything. It was 2004. We didn't have the resources now. You worked with whoever was at your gym. If some people had
Totally agree. There are just an unlimited amount of resources. Like my sister just got in the sport a couple of years ago, and I'm telling her, I'm like, Maria, when I was 20 years old, I didn't have anyone to ask. Social media was not that big. And I learned to space shows out that much through trial and error, because I made a huge mistake one time. I dieted from a fall to a spring. Stupidest thing I've ever done. I looked worse, and like, I learned then, I'm like, I'm never competing every year again in my life, and I'll still never do that. So
yeah, so I mean, I competed in 04, and then I got way too heavy in the off season. Got up to 210 because judges told you need to bulk after your
we've all
stuff on
been there, yeah.
Yeah. And I was 20 years old, or I was 18 years old, so I didn't really, I just did what I was told. I didn't know. And so, I dieted down, competed about 10 pounds heavier because I was still new enough to lifting that, but when I was from 18 to 20, I added like 10 pounds on my stage weight.
Yeah.
Because again, but I'd only been lifting. That was years 2 to 4 of lifting. I was still new. And then I competed again in 08. So from 06 to 08, I competed again. And that was probably the least amount of visual change I saw between contest seasons. And so I still saw change, but it wasn't as much because those are years 4 to 6 of lifting now. We're getting a little more experienced, right? And so, and that was age 20 to 22. And so it was kind of the combination of me realizing, hey, if I want to start seeing more progress, I'm probably going to need to take a little more time here. I 08 was kind of the first time too where I was competitive in open classes and stuff. Like I took first and second my 2 open classes. Like you know what I mean? I was like, but I was still well behind the guys winning overalls. And so it was like, all right, I need to take some time to get better. And the combination of that with life happening led to 4 years. I finished my bachelor's in 08. My master's was 08 to 2010. I moved to Illinois, started my PhD. And then did all my required coursework for that was 2010 to 2012. And so by the time like all of that, and I got married in 2011. So by the time all of that kind of got done, it was 2012. And that's when I stepped on stage and won my pro card. And I made a good amount of change in those 4 years. And then from there, it was, all right, well, I'm not going to compete again I need to get better to be a pro, and I'm not competing again until I'm done with school. And so I finished up school in 2015, then competed in 2016. Because I competed that one time in 2012 during grad school. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm competing in grad school again. It was really rough. And so, so I competed in 2016. And then by that point, I was coaching people and realized, the realization of, hey, these 4-year off seasons are making a big difference visually. And so, even 2016 till now, I can't believe the difference visually at the same weight. And like I kind of said, I'm 34 now, and we'll see how long this drags out before shows start again. If it's summer, if it's fall, I'll ride it out whatever I need to. But if it gets to be like fall and it's like a 1.5 year process here, I'm still competing whenever I can here. But then I probably won't compete again until I'm 40, and that's be 5.5 years or something like that. You know what I mean? And I'll do masters pro. So like I'm not. Yeah, I'm 34 right now, and so I just turned 34 a couple months ago, and so nothing. I'm not in a rush at this point, like I know shows will start at some point, whether they be without, maybe it's limited fans or without an audience or web stream, whatever. Like this year we'll have shows in some capacity. They're not big enough. Like it's not like college football where you have 100,000 people in a stadium. Like that's going to be a little rough to get back to that point. But but like a natural bodybuilding show that has 60 competitors and
nobody cares about us. Come on.
Yeah. There'll be shows at some point in 2020 because of how they're not massive, and or at least what I mean. None of the natural ones are massive.
No, we'll see shows this fall.
Yeah. this summer, this fall. And so all I got to do is just kind of hold here. And, you know, like I said, I've allowed my weight to drift up a little bit. I'm only up maybe 3 to 5 pounds. You know what I mean? It's not much. And so literally it'd be a month. Like once I know a show's for sure happening, within a month, you know what I mean? Like, but again, getting back to, you know, long off seasons, like the plan originally was I'm probably going to take at least 4 years. Depending on how long this drags out, I might just drag it out to 40 when I can do masters shows, you know.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush. Like I've been doing this, you know, it's been almost 16 years since my first show. It's been 18 years of training. Like, you know, a few months is a drop in the bucket. I'm not going to do this again for a while and I'll be okay.
Gotcha. So when you're working with someone for the first time, someone you just meet, obviously it's going to be what calories you give them will depend a lot on what their goal, but whether they're trying to gain or lose weight or maintain, how do you figure out that caloric intake and how do you break down the macros of that? I know it might be a lot of sampling or whatever, but how do you do it? And I know that answer could go on for days and days, but generalize it as much as you can. Yeah.
The first thing I do is I have them, you know, in the client application, I ask them, what are you eating currently? And that's where you can get at pretty quickly if they have any clue at all, like how to track or anything like that, and kind of what their background is. And sometimes like they'll give you something, you're like, yeah, this clearly, you know, they're a 250-pound male telling you they're eating like 1,600 calories a day. No, like you're something, you know, way off here. And so you got to sometimes just take an educated guess at what they're eating. And I think it's important too when they're tracking, you get an idea of, you know, what are they eating and how good are they at tracking? Have they ever tracked anything before? And so those are questions too that a lot of times when I have a client, they'll send the client application and I'll do an initial phone call or Skype call with them before we even get started. And so some of those are questions I'll ask during the Skype call too. And, you know, if someone is an absolute beginner to tracking, depending on where they're at, you know, if there's someone who's obese, non-competitor, never tracked food before, we may focus on some habit changes, like how much alcohol you drinking in a week, how often are you eating out, eating protein in each meal, how many, you know, X number of servings of fruits and vegetables a day. We might actually just keep adding additional habits, you know what I mean, as we're going, like, all right, let's try this for this week, you know, all right, that went well, let's add this other, you know, and try to just do that, because oftentimes things like that for an absolute beginner will make progress without like overwhelming them. For an average person, like say it's someone who, hey, I got 20 pounds to lose. I just to get down to a body fat I'm more comfortable with. You know, I've never really tracked before. Maybe we do something like, hey, let's worry about just a few basic things to have you track. We'll have you track your calories, you know, aim for X number of calories a day. We'll have you track your protein. So, you know, minimum of whatever protein a day. And then we'll do fruits and vegetables. So minimum X number of fruit, X number of vegetables a day. And maybe that's all, you know what I mean? I've had clients get a long way just off of worrying about calories, protein, and fruits and vegetables. You know, like not even tracking macros. And then, yeah, I mean, depending on the person, maybe if it's a bodybuilder in the off season, maybe we just do something like that, or maybe we do macros with a wider range. Or, you know, some people in the off season don't mind tracking macros to the gram either. And if someone's dieting for a show, yeah, then we're tracking macros to the gram. But, you know, that's where, you know, someone's goal, I always tell people your goal dictates kind of the means necessary to get there. You know, the more extreme your goal, the more extreme the mean, you know what I mean? What you got to do to get there, you know?
Yeah. And I like how you customize it. I do very similar. We're like, let me reiterate, you basically feel the person out on what their goal is, what they can handle, what they've been doing, where they're at mentally, and you give them like the best steps for their success is what I'm getting, right? Yeah.
And that may change over time. So maybe it's someone who's never tracked before. They have a few pounds, you know, they want to lose 20 pounds. And maybe we start with just track, you know, fall in this calorie range each day, get at least this much protein, fruits, vegetables. That carries them a ways, you know, and they get down to their goal. And then they say, well, you know, I'd like to kick this up a little bit and, you know, maybe try to do a show. Okay, well, now we need to tighten up a little more and let's track macros and, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
you know, and so the approach you use might not be the same approach. You can go the other direction too, where they diet down, they get to their goal, and then you start moving towards using habits to sustain that goal rather than tracking anymore. and so I had a client who was actually a few months ago was really happy with where they were at, and we transitioned to her to where she was doing. I think she was just worrying about things like, getting sufficient water each day, eating protein with each meal, eating a fruit or vegetable with each meal, getting her workouts in each week, staying active during the day. You know what I mean? Like just habits and to sustain her progress rather than tracking everything anymore.
Have you ever, so as far as like importance in tracking, have you ever worked with someone that has definitely like been putting in some time, been, got past some newbie gains, is down there a little bit, but they are very against tracking? How do you because I've had this happen myself where I like almost don't know what to tell the person because they get to a point where I'm like, you're at the point where we like need to see like the statistical errors, in my opinion. So like what advice would you give to someone that just is totally against tracking, or maybe they have some like big mental trauma, you know what I mean? How there's like a lot of disorders with that, like it creates a lot of anxiety and it almost can make people like worse off the deep end. Like what would you tell someone like that?
So I think, about 3/4 of my clients, I would say at this point, compete or want to compete, and a quarter don't. When I was earlier on, it was probably more like half and half, or even slightly more non-competitors. But at this point, like 3/4 of my client base wants to compete. So most of them have no issues with tracking. But there are serious, there's a high prevalence of psychological disorders in bodybuilding. There are a lot of people that turn to competing as a way to justify maybe a disordered eating pattern or body image issues. And in the short term, it helps, right? Because they diet for a show, they look better, they feel better. But you have to gain weight back afterwards, and that is where things usually go terrible. And so I think it's really, really important for anyone dieting for a show that you make sure that there, any of those underlying psychological issues are addressed before you start a prep. A prep's not going to make them better. A prep's only going to make them worse. And so I absolutely will refer out to, I have a couple therapists who specialize working with like physique athletes or have experience. And, I refer out in situations like that. I don't, know what I mean? Like, so those are important things to look at. As far as a general population person who doesn't want to track, I think, the first conversation I'd probably have with them is kind of the why and kind of explain to them, well, if we got you this far doing what you're doing, but we're going to have to do more to get you further, kind of feel out, are they willing to do that? Do they want to get further, or are they happy with where they're at? I oftentimes tell people, who are general population. So if you have a line, and on one end of the line is the most optimal, most ideal way to do something. If there was this is prepping for a show, nailing absolutely everything, no leeway because you're a few weeks out, that's one end of the line. The other end of the line is what the average American's doing, which the average American's obese. So they're eating out all the time, drinking a lot, not exercising, and so that's your average American. You just need to fall somewhere in between the two. And where you fall on that line, it should be a place where it's a kind of the balance point between where you're happy with the progress you're making and you're willing to put in the amount of work required to get there. So there's a balance point somewhere. And as long as you find a happy balance point in between there at a place that's sustainable for you, I'm totally fine with that. And someone who's not competing, like you need to be happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. That's a totally like individual based thing. I want to touch on, daily water intake. Like how important is water? Because a lot of people are not drinking water. Competitors are carrying around the gallon jug. They're very proud. How important is it actually? And not just like, because I know through performance, it definitely makes a difference. I would like to know, I know Lane Norton did a study where he determined that 1% water loss will affect your performance in some way. I find that pretty true with myself. I'm really sensitive with my body weight because I'm a pretty light person anyway. So a couple pounds for me. But like, as far as body composition and like performance, like what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, performance, absolutely. I mean, there are studies showing, there might be some with 1%. I know when you definitely get to 2 or 3%, you start seeing, your performance issues when you're dehydrated. And a lot of people tend to feel better when they're hydrated compared to not. And I think one overlooked thing with water too, and somebody who's dieting for just dieting, you're in a deficit. Hunger is an issue. And if you're not, if you drink more water, it can help kind of curb some of that hunger. Oftentimes, if you think about it, you drink a bunch of water with your meal, you feel more full, right? And so,
Yeah.
someone who's not drinking much water, that from that standpoint, and just overall health. I mean, most of your body is water, most of your muscle is water. Water is important.
Definitely. So it's not just about feeling better; it's about just being healthy too, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, drinking. And so drinking water is something oftentimes, if someone's not great at it, we set a goal for, it's something I might set a goal with clients also, just to keep them consistently drinking water.
Yeah. And you made a really good point with the keeping full aspect. I'm going to give people a full trick that I have. If I'm in the midst of a prep, I'm getting pretty damn hungry, especially at night. Before every meal, I literally chug as much water as I can, because then when I eat that meal, I actually have that like almost, it's halfway there a fullness. It's not total satisfaction, but it's like more satisfaction that I would have got versus not doing that. And it just keeps my water intake high. So
yeah. And I mean, that's, I think one thing a lot of people don't realize, if you haven't been stage lean, you don't understand this, but when you get super lean and you're below like your natural set point and you're below a place that's sustainable, hormones that make you feel hungry go up, and hormones that make you feel full go down. And so what ends up happening is you get to a point where that normal off signal isn't there. And so you can physically eat enough volume that your stomach is like full and distended, but you still have like a drive to keep eating more, even though like you're physically.
That is a great point. Yeah.
And so that's a result of, hunger hormones are off when you're that lean. And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize. And I think it's something it's hard to explain. Like a lot of the like what stage lean feels like is hard to explain unless you've been there. And so that's also, side note, that's also why I think in order to prep people for shows, you have to have done it yourself. You just can't empathize with someone, what they're going through, if you haven't felt it yourself. You can read about it and have people tell you about it all day long, but you just don't you don't understand until you've been there.
In my opinion, I swear every show I've ever done, like I have to, for a few weeks, almost out-train like food disorders myself, because you start eating and people don't realize, they're like, I ate so much. And I'm like, no, after a show or even a week or two, you can be full, crumpled up in your bed, hurting, and your body is still saying eat. It's like never shuts off. And like, you have to spend a lot of like mentality, in my opinion. And I've never had an eating disorder. I've never I'm not an overeater. My family is not. And like, so if I go through that, it almost like gives me some recognition to what other people go through. Cause I'm like, oh, this must be what like people with actual obesity eating disorders actually go through. And and I slowly out-train that, but every show it is, it's hard, so that's awesome. Let me shut this off. There we go.
And that,
sorry about that. There we go.
No, and that's where too, like I said, prep doesn't make eating disorders better. And so even people who don't have any issues going into a prep start to have things that start to look more in the disordered type direction by the end, at times. And so if you're going, it obviously that for most people, you gain weight back, everything gets back to normal, you're okay. Like if you're not, that's where, hey, go see a professional, take care of some of the underlying issues here. But if you're going into prep with disordered eating symptoms, it's only going to get worse. And so you need to really make sure that your relationship with food and body image and exercise is in a good place before you diet for a show. Exactly. Competing can be a very positive experience. I thoroughly enjoy it. I think it's enhanced my life. And I have plenty of clients that'll tell you the same, like it's something that enhances their life. But I think if used incorrectly, it can very much detract from your life and be a negative.
I've seen it ruin fitness for people. Like that's with anything. You take anything to an extreme, it can ruin it. We all know the people that they did their dream job with what they were passionate about, and it almost ruined their passion all to begin with. And Yeah. So no, that's a tough road, and finding that balance is very
Absolutely.
hard. Speaking of balance, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying I was just gonna say that's where spending more time in, not dieting for shows than dieting for shows is important. And finding that balance is as well, not just going gung ho all in trying to compete always.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, from what you just told me, you are like the master of sustainability, because from what you just told me, you're going to be better at this than me because you're staying in stage. I actually saw a picture of you the other day and I'm like, holy cow, you are still like shredded. I've let myself come up. I'm probably up like 9 pounds or so from what my contest 12 days out was. What like keeps you mentally motivated? Like the fact that you're okay with like, if it's this fall, I'm like hearing that myself and I'm like, holy cow, I'm impressed by that mentality. But like, is that a natural thing, or like what drives you to feel that way?
I don't know. I think, I'm stubborn, so that helps. But no, like I said, I think just knowing that, like, hey, it's been 4 years since I competed. It's going to be 4 to 6 more after this. If I have to drag it out a few more months, like I'll live. I actually feel a hell of a lot better right now. Just the few pounds gained. I have a pretty adaptive metabolism, so I can get my food pretty high before I gain. I also have to get it disproportionately low to lose. Some people they kind of maintain in a narrow window, and a little bit extra, and they gain, and a little bit less they lose. So kind of, it's like, hey, I gain really easy, but hey, it doesn't take much for me to lose. Where I'm where
that's hard, because then to gain weight you gotta like be pounding it, but then to lose you're saying you got to bring your calories lower than what would be normal-ish.
But yeah, I off season. I mean, even now, I still get up to like 4,200. I think with my peak off season intake, and when I was younger, it was in the fives. But the lowest my preps always get, 2,000, 21, 2,200. So you do the math. That's like a 2,000 plus calorie deficit a day. Like that shouldn't even be a thing, right? Like that you shouldn't. And you think, tell someone I'm eating 2,000 calories a day less in my off season. Oh, you must be losing weight really fast. No, like losing like a pound a week, if that.
That is,
and so and so my metabolism is really adaptive, and so I'm fortunate in the fact that I can use that to my advantage during this point. I'm back up to like 3,100 a day. I'm sitting in the 160, 161 range, and I was like 156, 157. And that's probably where I need to be, is somewhere around there. So I'm about 4-ish pounds over, but I'm eating an extra almost 1,000 calories a day and holding here, just because my metabolism is so adaptive. My energy is way better. My strength isn't going down anymore. I may see a rep or two even come back here and there. Hunger is not an issue. I sleep like a rock again. I wouldn't say I'm in a place that's sustainable, but for long term, but like, I'm surprised how good I feel here. And so I actually work with a coach myself. So I work with Cliff Wilson during he did my 2016 prep, my full off season, and then this prep. So it's been nice to have someone else, like, not overthink all, with everything else going on. I can just worry about all my clients and helping them through all of this. With whatever decisions they make regarding if they want to compete this year, if they're aiming for summer, are they aiming for fall, or what are we doing? Are we aiming for next year? What are we doing? But Cliff, just it takes the mental side out of it. I just do what I'm told.
And I think that's awesome, by the way, just so everyone listening, this is someone that coaches people for a living, and he still goes to someone for help. So I already know he knows that you can just never stop learning. When you're in a bodybuilding prep especially, it's just really good to have an outside source looking in at you, because like sometimes you don't see the whole picture. You're not thinking clearly, when it's about you and you care so much about that progress, like stuff starts to happen. It's kind of like when you're like in the dating game back before we were married and stuff, like you meet someone and like you don't know, there's just this like huge uncertainty, and you can just take all that away by like just getting a second opinion. It's really good. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And it just takes a lot of the stress away, because then I can just do what I'm told. I can just worry about my clients and making sure they're good, and With yourself, it's hard to take the emotion out of it. Like a client can send me an update. I can look at their update, the data, the numbers, and be like, all right, like objectively, like you need to, we should do this.
Exactly.
But when it's
Objectively,
yourself, it's hard to stay objective because there's an emotional component. So it's hard to keep that emotion out of it. So a lot of times you end up making like really drastic and rash decisions that you may not need to, or I think anyone who's been stage lean, you see yourself in one lighting versus another, and it can really mess with your head. And so that's where consistency with progress pictures is important. Same time of day, same conditions, same lighting, no filters, all of that stuff. So that way you get an accurate representation of where you're at, and you can accurately compare, so that it's not like, hey, I look better now because I'm in better lighting, or hey, I look worse now because I just did a really hard leg workout, so my legs are smoothed over, from all the water in them. Or you know what I mean? So like consistency with that is key also. So yeah, just that objective eye is really helpful.
Yeah, and like you said, someone that can take the emotion out of it, because as soon as you start caring, it's just your views get flawed a little bit in there. But yeah, let's do one more question, and I want to talk about metabolism. I want to know your opinion. Like, is it something that each of us are just gifted with, and it is what it is, or are there things we can do that help improve or destruct it?
Yeah, so I would say that, a lot of times people say, oh, my BMR is low. Well, actually, that's not the component of metabolism that varies much. Your basal metabolic rate is highly correlated with body size, lean mass, things like that. And so if you look at like the prediction equations for someone's like basal metabolic rate, everyone falls within about 5% of what's predicted. I mean, obviously a bigger person's going to have a higher, expend more calories than a smaller person. But if you look at like prediction equations, you don't see huge variance in basal metabolic rate. But you may see variance in total daily energy expenditure, like the total number of calories someone burns. And a lot of times that comes from non-exercise activity, in their lifestyle. So, I mean, moving a little bit, some people twitch and fidget more. That's a genetic thing. That's also something that goes down when you diet. You don't twitch and fidget as much. And you can't control that. But some people twitch and fidget off a lot more energy than others throughout the day. And then just general lifestyle, staying active. As far as things you can do, lift weights to build muscle, that can help, stay active throughout the day, eat a high protein diet, high protein, high fiber diet. Those will have a higher thermic effect of food, and exercise, move. Those would probably be the biggest things. And then, from a metabolic adaptation standpoint, spend more time out of a deficit than in one. Like, don't always be dieting, and that will help as well, because if you're constantly dieting, you're going to drive that down over time. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, those would be the biggest things. And some people simply can get away with more food than others. Like, I think a lot of times, especially people dieting for shows, you see this person had, got away with this, but this person had to go there. And there are differences between individuals. I had a day last year where I had two clients step on stage. Both were white males in their 30s, early to mid 30s. One won a pro card, and he was someone who has a slower metabolic rate, was down at like 1,800 calories a day by the end, had to do a decent amount of cardio, high step count. The other one was, I don't know if we got below 300 grams of carbs a day. He was doing back-to-back refeeds up to like 5, and that was like the worst of his prep. Step count was like 10,000 a day, not even anything crazy. And
holy, yeah, wow,
no like formal cardio in the gym or anything beyond that. And he took second in a pro show. And so they both were very, very successful, but they had to do very, very different things. And so I think just focusing on yourself and you know what I mean, and
experimentation. Be your own science experiment.
Try not to get caught up on like, well, this person does this or this person does that, but you're not that person.
Exactly. And actually, it happens once a week. It'll be like, oh, one of my members will be like, oh, I saw The Rock. Every day he eats a big stack of pancakes this high. And I'm like, it was probably his high carb day. And I'm like, you could probably do that too if you fit accordingly and eat kind of clean all week, and it's like kind of the weekly totals but finding your own.
And I mean, just different people have different caloric requirements, and I I've had clients who, like I said, I've had male clients who have had to get down, 1,600 calories a day or less. And
Yeah, that's low. Yeah.
I've had male clients who don't have to get below 3,000 calories a day, barely, and, I feel, same with female, same thing. And, on a calorie, calorie per day or calorie per pound per day basis, a lot of people end up down around like 10, 12 calories per pound per day by the end of prep, but there are definitely people who get below that, and definitely people who can get away with more than that. I had a guy who stepped on stage last year, won a novice class and took runner-up in an open class at a really big show. He took runner-up in the open class to the guy who won the overall. And I mean, there were at least a dozen guys in both of his classes, and he won his novice class and novice overall, like against the other. He did incredibly well. He was like 155, 160 pounds on stage, and his calorie per pound at the worst of prep was like 17 or 18. I mean, he was.
Gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was up like barely under. He was up around like 3,000 calories a day, even at the end of prep. He worked a super active job, and so, he had a fast. He told me though he had a pretty fast metabolism to begin with, and then he worked a super active job, and so he got away with that, But that's the exception. Like, I it kind of frustrates me always when you see people say, oh well, so and so, look at my client who ate all this food and didn't do cardio and got lean. Yeah, I have clients too who eat a lot of food and don't do cardio and get lean, but that's not everybody. Like, and so when you have a client who has a slower metabolic rate or something, or someone who has to really push hard, and they're like, well, why can't I do that? Because people are different, and so everybody's got their own challenges though, because, everyone's like, oh, for me, it must be great to eat so much food in the off season. Yeah, it is. But, that doesn't, that's nice, but dieting for a show when you have to go 2,000 plus calories below what your off-season intake is pretty terrible, and something most people don't have to do. So we all have challenges, right? And so people we're dealt a different, everyone dealt a different hand, and you make the best of the hand you're dealt.
Definitely. That's awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, man, for being on. Again, if you want to get Cliff and Peter's book, it's on Amazon, but is it on your guys' websites as well?
I don't have it on my website, but yeah, Amazon's probably the best place to get it.
I think that's where I got it. And then if you want to check him out on Instagram, I will put it in this video, but his Instagram is Fit Body Physique. If you want to send him an email, I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. We're all like staying at home. I don't know if you have gym access, but it's a rough life right now. We're just getting through. But his email is fitbodyphysique@gmail.com. But if you have questions, I'm sure he'd answer them for you. But thank you so much. And I definitely appreciate your time and everything. So if you're ever around Madison, you got to come train here. So I'd love it. Where do you live anyway?
I'm in Stevens Point.
Oh, you're not that bad. Okay, nice. Very cool. Well, yeah, if you're ever in the area, like I said, and hopefully I'll see you on stage this fall. I guess we'll all wait to hear what's going on and everything. But
I'm hanging out, waiting, and like I said, trying to stay close enough that, I can wait till within a few weeks of, hey, we're for sure having a show now, and all right, like a couple weeks, hop on stage, get a photo shoot in, and then, another 4 to 6 years before I do it again.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Well, I'll be cheering for you. If you need anything, just let me know. Otherwise, definitely, if you want to send me a message, send me at least your address. I'll send you a bunch of free stuff. I own a whey protein brand. My parents owned a cheese factory for a long time, so whey is like our thing too. But I'll at least send you a bunch of stuff. I really appreciate it. So you'll help a lot of people. Yeah. So 100 people will watch it, but we can help thousands just by putting all this free info out. So
yeah.
Awesome.
No, I run a dairy farm, so I can relate to the cheese.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, for sure. We're all about Wisconsin dairy. Here in Wisconsin, are you from?
No, Minnesota.
Minnesota, gotcha. Well, you're right next door. So awesome. Thank you so much. And I will see you on stage soon. I look forward to seeing all your pictures and stuff too.